Those words were spoken to his son when he asked his father why the Freemasons that he knew and his father were persecuting a local businessman and trying to drive him out of business. Now bear in mind that his son was not a Freemason. Let me say those words again for you folks. Quote, "If you are not one of us, you are nothing," unquote. All family ties were severed. Nothing mattered except doing one's job well and carrying out the worship of Mithra. The final ceremony took place amid the clash of cymbals, the beating of drums, and the unveiling of a statue of Mithra himself. This latter showed Mithra as a man carrying a bull by the hind leg. Now the symbolism of this piece of sculpture was explained to him. The bull, in addition to symbolizing fecundity, was representative of animal passion, and it was also the house in which the sun dwelt in the first 2,000 years of the religion. It was through invocations to Mithra that mankind first discovered how to overcome this force and how to discipline himself. Therefore, the secret of religion was partly that the worshiper must restrain himself physically in order to attain power over himself and over others. And this is the mystery of the Sphinx that man has been trying to decipher since man discovered the Sphinx in the modern world. It is simply this, that man is nothing but an animal with a brain, with an intellect. It is to remind us, folks. It is to tell us that no matter what you think or how high you get, you are still nothing but an animal with an intellect. Period. This graphic teaching of the diversion of sexual power into psychic channels shows that the Mithraists followed, in essence, the pattern of all mystery schools which believed in the production of power through discipline. In this, they are clearly distinguished from the more primitive and less important orgiastic schools which merely practiced indiscriminate indulgence, mass immorality, and so on. The neophyte in this initiation then drank a little wine from the symbol to show that he realized that the symbol is the means whereby ritual ecstasy comes, which puts him in touch with the higher powers. There are two long lines of initiates knelt on either side of the low stone benches which traversed the crypt. Remember, George Bush was initiated in the crypt or the tomb at Yale University into what is known as the Skull and Bones, the Russell Trust, the Brotherhood of Death. Now, remember, two lines of initiates knelt on either side of the low stone benches which traversed the crypt, and as the new member, accompanied by the priests who were initiating him, walked along the central aisle to the eating of the bread, a number of pieces of dried bread were placed on a drum, similar to those which were being softly beaten by one of the priests. The candidate ate one morsel, signifying that he accepted Mithra as the source of his food. This bread, according to their beliefs, had been exposed to the rays of the sun to absorb some of its quality, and thus the worshiper was partaking of the nature of the sun itself in this ritual observance. But it goes deeper than that, folks, because the sun is what enables all life to exist on this planet, being that the planet is at the perfect balance where it is either neither too hot nor too cold, and that the planet is tilted upon its axis, creating the seasons which enable food to be grown in the more northern latitudes than if the earth was stable on an axis where only one portion of the globe always was in direct alignment with the sun. Then it would be too hot at the equator. There would be one narrow band in the northern and southern hemisphere where crops could be grown, and it would be too cold in the northern and southern hemispheres. So this ritual observance has scientific facts behind it, in that the bread indeed did come from the sun. And now the initiate was taught the password of the cult, which was to identify him to other members, and which he was to repeat to himself frequently in order to maintain the thought always in his mind. Quote, I have eaten from the drum and drunk from the cymbal, and I have learned the secret of religion, unquote. This is the cryptic phrase which an early Christian writer, Maternus, reports as being taught to the Mithraeus, quote, by a demon, unquote. The second degree of initiation was called the secret, and during this the candidate was brought to a state of ecstasy in which he was somehow made to believe that he had seen the statue of the god actually endowed with life. Also, it's not likely that there was any mechanical method by which this was done, because no such apparatus has been found in Mithraic temples on earth. The candidate was brought up to the idol, to which he offered a loaf of bread and a cup of water, and this was to signify that he was a servant of the god, and that, quote, by what sustains my life, I offer my entire life to your service, unquote. The grade of soldier may show that the military arts were responsible for a good deal of the power of Mithra worship in ancient Persia. Certain it is, in any case, that this degree greatly appealed to the Roman warriors, who formed a very large part of the rank and file of the cult during its western expansion. A sign similar to a cross, signifying the sun, was made on the forehead of the initiate, who was thus marked as owned by the deity. A crown was placed before him, hanging from the point of a sword. This he took and placed it aside with the words, Mithra alone is my crown. And this, folks, this takes place in every mystery that there has ever been. Remember when Christ went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights and was tempted by Satan? Satan offered him the crown of any or all of the nations of the earth if he would just follow him, and Christ rejected it. The same thing happens in the mystery school. The initiate is always offered a crown, sometimes by the king or the emperor himself. If he accepts the crown, he's considered unworthy, being, as it would be interpreted as a threat to the real wearer of the crown, probably would have been executed. He's considered only worthy if he rejected the crown, symbolic of the ruler, the ruling of the nation or people or area. The Persian crown, it should be remembered, from which pattern all present-day crowns are eventually derived, is a golden sun disk with a hole in the center for the head. It is jagged at the edges, representing the sun's rays, just like that worn by the Statue of Liberty. And these projections are turned up to make what is still known in Western heraldry as the Oriental crown. You can also see this representation as the halo in Christian art. Now the candidate has to prove himself in a mock combat with soldiers and animals in a number of caves. When the Emperor Commodus went through this degree of initiation, he actually killed one of the participants, although he was supposed only to make a symbolic slaying. Passed through the soldier degree, the Mithraeus was eligible, after a lapse of time, to be promoted to the rank of lion. He was taken again to the cavern, and honey was smeared upon his brow as opposed to the water which had been used in his acceptance into the earlier degree, his baptism. The degree of lion was taken only by those who had decided to dedicate themselves completely to the cult, and who would henceforth have no trust with the ordinary world. The lion was, then, a sort of priest, but rather more of a monk who was trained in the rites of the cult and told certain secrets. The degree of lion of Mithras could only be conferred only when the sun was occupying the zodiacal sign of Leo, and that's about July 21st to August 20th, during the Persian month of Asad, the lion. Now, there's a good deal of astrological lore in Mithraism, and also an admixture with Kabbalistic numerology. The Greek branch of the Mithraeus, for example, works out that the numerical equivalent of the name spelt by them Mithras was 365, and thus corresponded to the number of days in the solar year. Well, since the deity was the sun, then this is exactly